8-year-old Emma Thompson sat by her bedroom window, watching the autumn leaves dance in the October breeze. Her small hands pressed against the cool glass as she gazed at the world outside that seemed so far away now. The cancer treatments had left her weak, but her spirit remained unbroken. Her mother, Sarah, noticed how Emma's eyes would light up whenever they watched the changing of the guard ceremony on television. "Mummy, do you think the guards are real people under those big black hats?" Emma asked one afternoon, her voice barely above a whisper. The chemotherapy had taken its toll, making even simple conversations exhausting. Sarah smiled, brushing Emma's thin hair away from her forehead. "Of course they are, sweetheart. They're very special soldiers who protect the Queen." Emma's eyes sparkled with wonder. She had always been fascinated by fairy tales and stories of knights and princesses. The royal guards, with their red uniforms and towering bearskin hats, seemed like characters from her favorite storybooks come to life. Dr. Martinez had been honest with the Thompson family 3 weeks earlier. Emma's leukemia had progressed beyond what modern medicine could cure. The treatments were no longer working, and they had perhaps 2 months left together. The news had shattered Sarah and her husband David, but they were determined to make Emma's remaining time as magical as possible. The family had always been close, but Emma's illness had brought them even closer together. David, a construction worker, had taken time off from his job to spend every possible moment with his daughter. Sarah, who worked part-time at a local bakery, had completely stopped working to care for Emma full-time. Their modest home in Leeds felt both like a sanctuary and a prison. While it was filled with love and Emma's favorite things, it also served as a constant reminder of their daughter's condition. The walls were covered with Emma's drawings of princesses, castles, and yes, royal guards. She had an incredible imagination and would spend hours creating elaborate stories about brave soldiers protecting magical kingdoms. Emma's best friend from school, Lucy, would visit whenever possible. The two girls would play quietly in Emma's room, often acting out scenes where they were princesses being protected by noble guards. Lucy didn't fully understand why Emma couldn't come to school anymore, but she knew her friend was very sick. "Emma always talks about the guards at Buckingham Palace," Lucy told Sarah one day after a visit. "She says they must be the bravest people in the world because they stand so still and protect everyone." That evening, as Sarah tucked Emma into bed, her daughter made an unexpected request. "Mummy, I know I can't go to London because I'm too sick, but do you think one of the guards might want to come visit me?" Sarah's heart broke a little more. She had been dreading this moment when Emma would ask for something seemingly impossible. How do you explain to a dying 8-year-old that royal guards don't make house calls? How do you tell your child that some wishes, no matter how pure and heartfelt, might not come true? "That's a beautiful wish, darling," Sarah said carefully. "The guards are very busy protecting the Queen, but maybe we can think of another way to feel close to them." Emma nodded, understanding more than her parents realized. She had heard the hushed conversations between her mother and father late at night. She knew her time was running short, even if no one had said it directly to her. Over the next few days, Emma's fascination with the royal guards grew stronger. She asked David to print pictures from the internet, and she studied them with the intensity of a scholar. She learned about their history, their duties, and their traditions. For a child who was losing control over her own body, learning about these disciplined, strong soldiers gave her comfort. Sarah watched her daughter's obsession with a mixture of admiration and heartbreak. Emma had always been curious and intelligent, but now her interest in the guards seemed to give her purpose during her darkest days. The little girl would sit for hours, drawing pictures of herself standing next to the tall soldiers, imagining conversations they might have. David suggested they might be able to arrange a video call with someone from the military, or perhaps visit a local army base when Emma felt strong enough. But Sarah could see in her daughter's eyes that this wasn't just about meeting any soldier. Emma had connected with something specific about the royal guards, something that spoke to her young heart about honor, duty, and protection. One particularly difficult night, after Emma had been sick from her medication, she looked up at her mother with tears in her eyes. "Mummy, If I can't meet a real guard, will you promise me something? Anything, sweetheart. Will you tell them about me? Will you tell them that I think they're heroes? Sarah nodded, fighting back her own tears. At that moment, she made a silent promise to herself. She didn't know how, but she was going to find a way to make her daughter's wish come true. Emma deserved to have this one magical thing in her remaining time. The next morning, while Emma slept, Sarah sat at her computer with a cup of coffee and began typing. She wasn't sure where to send her message or if anyone would read it, but she was going to try. Her daughter believed in heroes, and Sarah was going to do everything in her power to show Emma that sometimes heroes believe in little girls too. As she wrote about Emma's courage, her fascination with the guards, and her simple wish to meet one of them, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. She had always taught Emma that kindness existed in the world and that good people would help when they could. Now she was about to put that belief to the ultimate test. The email was addressed to the general inquiries of the British Army, the royal household, and several military charities. Sarah knew it was a long shot, but she also knew that if she didn't try, she would regret it for the rest of her life. Emma's wish was pure and innocent, and surely somewhere in the vast machinery of the military and royal establishment, there was someone with a heart big enough to care about one little girl's dream. 3 days passed without any response to Sarah's emails, and she began to lose hope. Emma's condition was worsening, and the little girl spent most of her time sleeping. When she was awake, she would ask about the guards, wondering if they had received her mother's message. Maybe they're too busy protecting the Queen, Emma said weakly one afternoon, trying to comfort her mother, who looked increasingly worried. Sarah's phone rang that Thursday evening while she was preparing Emma's medication. The caller ID showed an unknown London number, and she almost didn't answer, thinking it might be another telemarketer. "Hello, is this Mrs. Sarah Thompson?" The voice was crisp, professional, with a distinctly military tone. "Yes, this is Sarah. Mrs. Thompson, my name is Sergeant Major James Williams from the Welsh Guards. I received your email about your daughter Emma." Sarah's heart stopped. She had sent the email to so many different addresses, she hadn't really expected anyone to respond, especially not someone with such an official title. "I hope you don't mind me calling directly," Sergeant Major Williams continued. "Your message about Emma was forwarded to me through several channels. I understand she's quite fascinated with the Royal Guards." "Yes, she is," Sarah managed to say, her voice trembling. "She's always loved the idea of brave soldiers protecting people. She draws pictures of them constantly. Mrs. Thompson, I was wondering if it would be possible for me to visit Emma. I happen to be traveling north next week for a family visit, and Leeds isn't far out of my way." Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. You would do that? You would come here?" "It would be my honor, ma'am. From what I understand, Emma is fighting a very brave battle herself. I think she and I might have quite a bit to talk about." That night, Sarah could hardly contain her excitement as she told Emma about the phone call. Emma's eyes grew wide with wonder, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled a genuine, bright smile. "A real guard is coming to see me?" Emma whispered, as if speaking too loudly might break the magic of the moment. "Yes, sweetheart. Sergeant Major Williams will be here next Tuesday." Emma spent the weekend preparing for the visit. Despite her weakness, she insisted on drawing a special picture for Sergeant Major Williams. It showed a tall guard in his red uniform standing next to a small girl, both of them smiling under a bright sun. At the bottom, in her careful 8-year-old handwriting, she wrote, "Thank you for keeping everyone safe." David cleaned the house from top to bottom, and Sarah baked Emma's favorite cookies. The whole family felt a sense of anticipation they hadn't experienced since before Emma's diagnosis. It was as if a little bit of magic was finally coming into their world. Tuesday morning arrived crisp and clear. Emma had barely slept, too excited about her special visitor. Sarah had helped her put on her favorite dress, a blue one with small flowers that made her feel pretty despite how thin she had become. At exactly 11 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. David opened it to find Sergeant Major Williams, a tall, distinguished man in his military uniform, holding a small wrapped package. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Sergeant Major Williams. I'm here to see Emma." But it wasn't just Sergeant Major Williams at the door. Behind him stood two other guards, also in their ceremonial uniforms. Sarah gasped as she realized that not one, but three royal guards had come to visit her daughter. "I hope you don't mind," Sergeant Major Williams said with a gentle smile. Lance Corporal Davies and Guardsman Mitchell wanted to meet Emma as well. "We don't often get to meet such dedicated admirers of the regiment." Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, moving slowly but with obvious excitement. When she saw the three uniformed men in her living room, she stopped and stared, her mouth open in amazement. "Hello, Emma," Sergeant Major Williams said, his usually stern military voice softened with warmth. "We've come quite a long way to meet you." Emma slowly made her way down the stairs, holding tightly to the banister. The three guards stood at attention as she approached, treating her with the same respect they would show to royalty. "Are you really real?" Emma asked, her voice filled with wonder. Lance Corporal Davies, a young man who couldn't have been much older than 25, knelt down to Emma's level. "We're as real as you are, miss, and we've heard that you're quite the artist." Emma nodded shyly and presented her drawing to Sergeant Major Williams. He examined it carefully, his face serious as if he were reviewing an important military document. "This is exceptional work, Emma," he said formally. "I believe this deserves a place of honor in our regimental headquarters." The three guards spent the next 2 hours with Emma and her family. They told stories about their duties, explained their uniforms, and answered every question Emma could think of. They taught her about military history, showed her how they march, and even demonstrated some of their ceremonial movements in the Thompsons' small living room. But more than that, they listened to Emma. They heard about her drawings, her stories, and her dreams. They treated her not like a sick child, but like an equal, someone whose thoughts and ideas mattered. Guardsman Mitchell presented Emma with the package they had brought. Inside was an official Welsh Guards beret, sized perfectly for her small head, along with a certificate naming her an honorary member of the regiment. "This is very special, Emma," Sergeant Major Williams explained. "Only a few people outside the military have ever received this honor. You're now officially one of us." Emma put on the beret, and despite her illness, she stood straighter, her chin lifted with pride. The three guards saluted her, and she solemnly saluted back, having practiced the motion from watching videos. As the visit continued, Sarah and David watched in amazement. Their daughter, who had been so weak and tired for weeks, was animated and engaged. She was laughing, asking questions, and sharing her stories with confidence. The guards had given her something precious. They had made her feel important, brave, and valued. When it was time for the guards to leave, Emma hugged each of them. "Thank you for protecting everyone," she whispered to Sergeant Major Williams. "And thank you for protecting me, too." "Emma," he replied, "I think you're the one protecting all of us. Your courage gives us strength." As the three men prepared to leave, Sergeant Major Williams pulled Sarah aside. "Mrs. Thompson, Emma is an extraordinary little girl. What she's facing, it takes more bravery than anything we've ever done. We're honored to have met her." The day after the guard's visit, Emma woke up with more energy than she had shown in weeks. She wore her honorary beret to breakfast and insisted on keeping the certificate next to her bed, where she could see it when she went to sleep. "Mummy, do you think Sergeant Major Williams meant it when he said I was brave?" Emma asked, touching the red fabric of her beret. "I think he meant every word, sweetheart," Sarah replied, still amazed by the transformation she saw in her daughter. What the Thompson family didn't know was that their story was just beginning to unfold. Back in London, Sergeant Major Williams couldn't stop thinking about Emma. That evening, he shared the experience with his wife, Margaret, over dinner. "I've met generals and even members of the royal family," he told her, "but I've never been more impressed by anyone's courage than I was by that little girl today." Margaret, who worked as a nurse, understood the impact such visits could have. "You did something wonderful, James. You gave her dignity and respect during the hardest time of her life." But James Williams felt like he had received more than he had given. Emma's pure fascination with their duty, her genuine gratitude, and her incredible spirit in the face of such a difficult battle had reminded him why he had chosen to serve in the first place. The next morning, Sergeant Major Williams did something he had never done before. He called his commanding officer, Colonel Richardson, and requested a meeting to discuss Emma Thompson. "Sir, I know this is unusual, but I'd like to talk to you about a little girl in Leeds," he began, feeling somewhat nervous about the unconventional request. Colonel Richardson, a stern but fair man who had served for 30 years, listened as Williams described his visit with Emma. He talked about her drawings, her honorary membership, and the way she had saluted them with such serious respect. "Williams, what exactly are you asking me to do?" the colonel inquired. "Sir, I think Emma Thompson represents everything good about what we do. She believes in service, in protecting others, in standing up for what's right. I think she deserves more than just one visit." Colonel Richardson was quiet for a long moment. He had heard many requests in his career, but this was different. This wasn't about military protocol or official duties. This was about a soldier asking his superior to help make a dying child's remaining time extraordinary. "Tell me more about this girl," the colonel said finally. Over the next hour, Williams shared everything he knew about Emma. Her love of stories about knights and heroes, her artistic talents, her incredible bravery in facing her illness, and the way she had made 3 grown soldiers feel like the heroes she believed them to be. Colonel Richardson made a decision that would change everything. "Williams, I want you to coordinate with the family. Find out what Emma's schedule is like, how she's feeling, what she might enjoy, and I want you to put together a proposal." "A proposal, sir?" "If this little girl is going to be an honorary member of our regiment, then she should be treated like one. I'm thinking we might be able to do something special for her." That afternoon, Sarah received another call from Sergeant Major Williams. This time he asked about Emma's condition, her treatment schedule, and whether she would be strong enough for another visit. "She hasn't stopped talking about you and the other guards," Sarah told him. "She's been drawing pictures of all 3 of you, and she keeps practicing her salute in the mirror. Mrs. Thompson, how would you feel about bringing Emma to London? We'd like to show her where we work, introduce her to more of the regiment, maybe give her a tour of some of the places she's been drawing." Sarah was speechless. The thought of taking Emma to London in her condition seemed impossible, but she also knew it would be a dream come true for her daughter. "I don't know if she's strong enough for such a trip," Sarah said hesitantly. "We would arrange everything, ma'am. Transportation, accommodation, medical support if needed. Emma is one of us now, and we take care of our own." When Sarah told Emma about the invitation, the little girl's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Despite her weakness, she clapped her hands and actually jumped up and down. "I can see where the guards live. I can see Buckingham Palace." "Really? Mummy? Really?" David was more cautious than his wife and daughter. The practical side of him worried about Emma's health, the cost of the trip, and the logistics of traveling with a seriously ill child. "Sarah, what if something happens? What if she gets sicker while we're away from her doctors?" But Sarah could see something in Emma that she hadn't seen since before the diagnosis. Her daughter was excited about the future, looking forward to something, making plans. For weeks they had all been living day by day, afraid to think beyond the immediate moment. Now Emma was talking about what she would wear to meet more guards, what questions she would ask, what drawings she might create of her London adventure. Dr. Martinez was surprisingly supportive when they consulted him about the trip. "Emma's condition is stable right now," he explained. "If this is something that will bring her joy, I think we should make it happen. I can provide you with all the medical information you'll need, and I can put you in touch with a colleague at Great Ormond Street Hospital just in case." The planning began immediately. Sergeant Major Williams coordinated with his superiors, and within days, they had arranged for the Thompson family to stay at a small hotel near Wellington Barracks. The military would cover all expenses, transportation would be provided, and Emma would receive a full regimental experience. Word of Emma's story began to spread through the ranks. Soldiers who had never met her started asking about the little girl from Leeds who had become an honorary guard. Her drawing was indeed displayed in the regimental headquarters, and several of the men had made copies to keep in their own lockers. Lance, Corporal Davies, who had been particularly taken with Emma during their first meeting, started organizing what he called Operation Emma. He coordinated with other regiments, arranged for special presentations, and even contacted the Royal Collection to see if Emma might be able to see some historical artifacts. Guardsman Mitchell, the youngest of the 3 original visitors, began writing letters to Emma. He told her about his daily duties, described the other soldiers she would meet, and answered her many questions about military life. Emma treasured these letters and would have her mother read them multiple times. As the date for the London visit approached, Emma's excitement was infectious. Even David, despite his worries, found himself looking forward to seeing his daughter experience something magical. Sarah spent hours helping Emma plan what to pack, what to wear, and what gifts they might bring for their new friends. "Mummy," Emma said one evening as Sarah was tucking her into bed, "do you think the Queen knows about me?" "I don't know, sweetheart. But I know that a lot of very special people are excited to meet you." Emma smiled and adjusted her honorary beret on her bedside table. "I can't wait to show them all my pictures. I've been practicing being a good soldier." What Emma didn't know was that her story had indeed reached some very high places. Colonel Richardson had mentioned her to his superiors, who had mentioned her to their superiors. The ripple effect of one little girl's simple wish was spreading through the very highest levels of the British military establishment. The morning of their departure to London, Emma woke before dawn. She had barely slept, too excited about the adventure ahead. Sarah found her daughter sitting by the window, already dressed and wearing her honorary beret, watching for the car that would take them to the train station. "Are you ready for your big day, soldier?" David asked, using the playful title that had become Emma's favorite. "I've been ready forever, Daddy," Emma replied, her small suitcase packed with her drawings, the letters from Guardsman Mitchell, and her most treasured possessions to show her new friends. The journey to London was magical in itself. Emma had never been on a train before, and she pressed her face to the window watching the countryside roll by. The guards had arranged for first-class tickets, and the train staff, who had been briefed about their special passenger, treated Emma like visiting royalty. "Look, Mummy," Emma pointed out the window. "Everything looks so different from home. Do you think London will be as big as it looks in pictures?" Sarah smiled, watching her daughter's excitement. For a few hours it was easy to forget about hospitals, treatments, and the ticking clock that shadowed their lives. Emma was just a little girl on an adventure, full of wonder and anticipation. Sergeant Major Williams met them at King's Cross Station along with Lance Corporal Davies. Both men were in their ceremonial uniforms, and Emma's face lit up when she saw them waiting on the platform. "Honorary Guard Thompson, reporting for duty," Emma said with a serious salute, making both soldiers smile. "Outstanding form, Thompson," Sergeant Major Williams replied formally. "Are you ready to see your regimental headquarters?" The first stop was Wellington Barracks, where Emma was introduced to more members of the Welsh Guards. Word of her visit had spread throughout the regiment, and soldiers came from all corners of the barracks to meet the little girl who had captured their colleagues' hearts. Each soldier shook Emma's hand seriously and thanked her for her service as an honorary guard. They showed her the mess hall where they ate, the training grounds where they practiced, and the armory where they kept their ceremonial weapons. But the highlight of the barracks visit was when Colonel Richardson himself came to meet Emma. This distinguished officer, who commanded respect from hundreds of soldiers, knelt down to Emma's level and spoke to her as an equal. "Guard Thompson, I've heard exceptional reports about your dedication to the regiment," he said formally. "I understand you're quite the artist as well." Emma nodded shyly and presented the colonel with a new drawing she had made specifically for him. It showed the entire regiment standing in formation, with Emma in her beret standing proudly among them. "This is magnificent work, Thompson. I think this belongs in my office, where I can see it every day and remember what true courage looks like." The colonel then did something unprecedented. He presented Emma with his own regimental coin, a special token that usually only officers received for exceptional service. "This is to remind you that you're always part of our family," he explained. "Wherever you are, you're one of us." That evening, After a rest at their hotel, Emma and her family were taken to see the changing of the guard ceremony at Buckingham Palace. But this wasn't just any viewing. They had been given special access to watch from a privileged position, with guardsman Mitchell providing a detailed explanation of every movement. Emma watched in awe as the soldiers she had come to know as friends performed their ancient duties with precision and dignity. When she spotted Lance Corporal Davies among the guards, she waved excitedly, and though he couldn't wave back while on duty, she was sure she saw him wink at her. "They're so brave and strong," Emma whispered to her mother. "I want to be just like them." "You already are, sweetheart," Sarah replied, tears in her eyes as she watched her daughter's pure joy. After the ceremony, something unprecedented happened. The guards who had participated came over to where Emma was standing. In full view of the crowds of tourists, they saluted their youngest colleague. Emma saluted back with the perfect form they had taught her, and the surrounding crowd, not understanding the significance but sensing something special was happening, began to applaud. That night at the hotel, Emma could barely contain her excitement as she told her parents about every detail of the day. She had met dozens of soldiers, seen the palace up close, and felt like a real part of something important and meaningful. "Daddy, did you see how they all knew my name? They called me Guard Thompson, just like I was a real soldier." David, who had been skeptical about the trip, was now completely won over. He had watched grown men, tough military professionals, treat his daughter with genuine respect and affection. They hadn't patronized her or treated her like a sick child. They had seen something in Emma that made them want to be better soldiers themselves. The next day brought even more surprises. The family was taken to the Tower of London, where the yeoman warders, the famous beefeaters, had arranged a special private tour for Emma. They showed her the crown jewels, told her stories about the tower's history, and even let her try on a small ceremonial helmet. But the most magical moment came when they visited the ravens. The legend says that if the ravens ever leave the Tower of London, the kingdom will fall. The Raven Master, a gruff military man who rarely showed emotion, was surprisingly gentle with Emma. "These birds have been protecting England for centuries," he explained. "Just like the guards you've met, they have an important job to do." One of the ravens, a particularly friendly bird named Moonin, seemed drawn to Emma. He hopped closer to her than he normally did with visitors, and even allowed her to gently stroke his feathers. "He likes you," the Raven Master said with surprise. "Moonin doesn't usually take to strangers like that." Emma giggled as the large black bird cocked his head at her, almost as if he were trying to have a conversation. "I think he knows I'm a guard too," she said seriously. That afternoon at the Guards Museum, Emma was given another surprise. The museum had created a special display featuring her artwork alongside historical artifacts from the regiment. Her drawings were professionally framed and mounted, displayed with the same care as paintings of famous battles and portraits of distinguished officers. "Your artwork will inspire future generations of guards," the museum curator explained to Emma. "Children will come here and see that anyone can be brave, anyone can serve their country, and anyone can make a difference." Emma studied her artwork displayed so professionally and felt a sense of pride she had never experienced before. Her drawings, which had started as a way to pass time during her illness, were now part of history. As they prepared to return to their hotel that evening, Sergeant Major Williams pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. "Mrs. Thompson, I want you to know that Emma has changed all of us. The men are talking about her constantly, sharing her story with their families. She's reminded us why we do what we do." Sarah was moved by his words, but she could see there was something more he wanted to say. "There's something else, ma'am. Tomorrow we have one more surprise planned for Emma, something that we hope will be very special indeed." When Sarah asked what it was, Sergeant Major Williams just smiled mysteriously. "You'll have to wait and see, Mrs. Thompson. But I think Emma is going to remember tomorrow for the rest of her life." Emma woke up on their final morning in London with mixed feelings. She was excited about whatever surprise awaited her, but sad that their magical adventure was coming to an end. She had grown so close to her new military family that leaving felt like saying goodbye to a part of herself. "Mummy, do you think the guards will forget about me when I go home?" Emma asked as Sarah helped her get dressed. Sweetheart, I don't think anyone could ever forget about you, Sarah replied, though she privately worried about the same thing. Would this incredible experience fade into a distant memory? Or would the connections Emma had made continue? At breakfast, Sergeant Major Williams arrived earlier than usual, and Emma noticed he seemed nervous, which was unusual for the composed military man. "Guard Thompson, are you ready for your final official duty?" he asked with unusual formality. "Yes, sir," Emma replied, straightening her shoulders and adjusting her beret. "Then we have somewhere very important to go." The car journey through London seemed different that morning. Instead of taking their usual route, they drove through areas Emma hadn't seen before, with beautiful parks and grand buildings. Eventually, they passed through impressive gates with guards who saluted their car as it passed. "Where are we going?" Emma asked, her curiosity growing. "You'll see very soon," Lance Corporal Davies replied, barely containing his excitement. The car finally stopped in front of a magnificent building that Emma recognized from pictures. It was Buckingham Palace, but this time, instead of standing outside with the crowds of tourists, they were driving through the gates and into the courtyard. Emma's eyes grew wide as the reality hit her. Are we going inside the palace? We are indeed," Sergeant Major Williams confirmed. "You have an appointment, Guard Thompson." Inside the palace, Emma was overwhelmed by the grandeur. The corridors were lined with paintings and decorated with furnishings more beautiful than anything she had ever seen. But what struck her most was how the palace staff greeted her. Everyone they passed smiled at her warmly, and several people addressed her as Guard Thompson. They were led to an elegant waiting room where Emma sat nervously between her parents. She had never been in a place so fancy, and she felt very small in the enormous chair. "Emma," her father whispered, "no matter what happens next, remember that you belong here just as much as anyone else. You've earned this." A door opened and a well-dressed gentleman entered. "Guard Thompson, Her Majesty will see you now." Emma's heart nearly stopped. She looked up at her parents with wide eyes, hardly believing what she was hearing. Sarah and David were just as shocked, having had no idea this was what the surprise would be. They were led into a beautiful room where, sitting in an elegant chair, was Queen Elizabeth II herself. The Queen, dressed in a soft blue dress with her characteristic pearls, smiled warmly as Emma entered. Emma remembered what Sergeant Major Williams had taught her about protocol. Despite her shock, she performed a perfect curtsy, holding the edges of her dress just as she had practiced while playing princess at home. "Your Majesty," she said in her small, clear voice. "Guard Thompson," the Queen replied with genuine warmth. "I've heard quite remarkable things about you." The Queen invited Emma to sit beside her, and for the next 30 minutes they had a conversation that Emma would treasure forever. The Queen asked about her drawings, her honorary membership in the Welsh Guards, and her experiences in London. "I understand you've been very brave during a difficult time," the Queen said gently. Emma nodded seriously. "The doctors say I'm very sick, Your Majesty. But the guards taught me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what's right even when you are scared." The Queen smiled at this wisdom from such a young person. "That's a very grown-up understanding of courage, my dear." The Queen then did something that surprised everyone in the room. She stood up and walked to a nearby desk, returning with a small, elegant box. "Emma, I would like to present you with something very special. This is the British Empire Medal, and I'm awarding it to you for your exceptional courage and for the inspiration you've given to others." Emma looked at the medal in its beautiful case, hardly comprehending what was happening. "Is this really for me?" "It certainly is. You've shown that heroism comes in many forms, and your bravery in facing your illness with such grace and spirit is truly worthy of recognition." The Queen then pinned the medal to Emma's dress, and the palace photographer captured the moment. Emma stood straighter than she ever had, proud and dignified in a way that had nothing to do with her age or her illness. "Now," the Queen continued, "I understand you're quite the artist. I wonder if you might do me a great honor?" Emma nodded eagerly. "I would very much like one of your drawings for my private collection." Would you be willing to create something special for me? Emma could hardly speak, but she managed to say, I would be honored, Your Majesty. The Queen arranged for art supplies to be brought, and Emma spent the next hour creating a drawing while the Queen watched with interest. The picture showed the Queen surrounded by her guards, with Emma standing proudly among them, all of them protecting a castle that looked suspiciously like Buckingham Palace. This is absolutely beautiful, Emma. It will have a place of honor in my study. As the visit came to an end, the Queen took Emma's hands in hers. Emma, you must promise me something. Promise me that you will always remember how special you are and how many people you've touched with your courage. Emma nodded solemnly. I promise, Your Majesty. And I promise you something in return, the Queen said. Your story, your bravery, your beautiful spirit, these things will live on long after you're gone. You've made a difference in this world, and that's something very few people can say. The Queen then presented Emma with one final gift, a personally signed photograph of their meeting, inscribed with the words, To guard Emma Thompson, with admiration for your courage and gratitude for your service. Elizabeth R. As they prepared to leave, Emma curtsied once more, but this time the Queen surprised everyone by bending down and giving Emma a gentle hug. Take care of yourself, my brave little guard, the Queen whispered. Walking back through the palace corridors, Emma was quiet, overwhelmed by what had just happened. She clutched her medal and the signed photograph, still hardly believing it was real. Mummy, she finally said, did that really happen? Did I really meet the Queen? Yes, sweetheart, Sarah replied, her own voice thick with emotion. You really did. Outside the palace, a small crowd of Emma's military friends had gathered to see her off. Sergeant Major Williams, Lance Corporal Davies, Guardsman Mitchell, and several other guards she had met during her visit were waiting in formation. As Emma approached them, they came to attention and saluted their honorary colleague one final time. Emma saluted back, her British Empire medal gleaming on her chest, and for a moment she looked every inch the soldier she had always dreamed of being. Colonel Richardson stepped forward with one last surprise. Guard Thompson, the regiment has voted unanimously. We would like to name you our regimental mascot. Your photograph will hang in our headquarters permanently, and your story will be told to every new recruit who joins our ranks. Emma was speechless. To be remembered, to be part of something permanent and important, it was more than she had ever dared to dream. The journey home to Leeds was bittersweet. Emma spent the train ride looking through all her treasures, her medal, her signed photograph, her regimental coin, and the dozens of letters and small gifts the guards had given her. Each item represented a friendship, a moment of magic, a memory that would last forever. Daddy, Emma said as they neared Leeds, I know I'm still sick, and I know things are going to be hard, but I'm not sad anymore. David looked at his daughter, who seemed somehow older and wiser than when they had left just a few days earlier. Why aren't you sad, sweetheart? Because I did something important. I made friends with real heroes, and they made me feel like a hero too. Even if I don't get better, I know that I mattered. I know that I made a difference. Sarah wiped away tears as she listened to her 8-year-old daughter speak with such profound understanding and acceptance. Emma had found something in London that no medicine could provide. She had found her place in the world, her purpose, and the knowledge that her life had meaning. When they arrived home, Emma immediately set up a special display in her bedroom, with all her treasures from London. She placed her British Empire medal in the center, surrounded by her photographs, letters, and drawings. It looked like a shrine to the most important adventure of her life. That evening, as Sarah tucked Emma into bed, her daughter was quiet and thoughtful. Mummy, will you help me write thank you letters to everyone? I want to make sure they know how much this meant to me. Of course, darling. We'll start tomorrow. Emma smiled and closed her eyes, her hand resting on her regimental coin. I can't wait to tell Dr. Martinez about meeting the Queen. He's not going to believe it. As Sarah turned off the light, she realized that something fundamental had changed. For months, their family had been focused on Emma's illness, on treatments and doctor visits and the constant awareness of time running out. But now, Emma had something else to focus on. The knowledge that she was loved, respected and valued by people who barely knew her but who. In the weeks following their return from London, Emma's health began to decline more rapidly. The excitement and adventure of the trip seemed to have used up much of her remaining energy, but she showed no regret. Instead, she spent her days writing thank you letters to each of the guards who had become her friends, dictating to her mother when writing became too difficult. "Dear Sergeant Major Williams," she would begin each letter with formal military precision. "Thank you for making my dream come true. I will never forget how you made me feel like a real soldier." The responses came quickly. Not only did each guard write back personally, but letters began arriving from other members of the regiment who had heard Emma's story. Some included photographs, others contained small regimental badges or pins, and all of them expressed how much Emma had inspired them. Dr. Martinez was amazed by the transformation in his young patient. While Emma's physical condition continued to worsen, her emotional state was remarkably peaceful and positive. "She's different," he told Sarah and David during one of their consultations. "I've seen many children facing what Emma is facing, and the ones who find this kind of peace, they're the ones who teach us all something about what really matters in life." Emma's story began to spread beyond the military community. A journalist who had heard about her meeting with the Queen requested an interview, and soon Emma's tale was featured in newspapers across the country. The article, titled "The Bravest Little Guard," touched the hearts of thousands of readers. Letters started arriving from people all over Britain and beyond. Children sent drawings, adults shared their own stories of courage, and families facing similar challenges reached out to express their gratitude for Emma's inspiring example. One letter particularly touched the Thompson family. It came from another 8-year-old girl named Sophie, who was also battling cancer. "Dear Emma," Sophie wrote in careful handwriting, "I saw your picture in the newspaper with the Queen and the soldiers. My mummy read me your story and it made me feel brave. If you can be a guard, maybe I can be brave too. Would you be my friend?" Emma insisted on responding immediately. With her mother's help, she wrote back to Sophie, and soon the two girls were exchanging letters regularly. Emma shared her experiences with the guards, and Sophie shared her own dreams and fears. The friendship gave both girls strength during their darkest moments. Word of Emma's correspondence with other sick children reached Sergeant Major Williams, who discussed it with his colleagues. The guards decided to expand their mission. They began visiting other children in hospitals, inspired by Emma's example and the difference they had seen they could make. Emma started something bigger than herself, Lance Corporal Davies explained to his wife. "She showed us that our duty isn't just to protect buildings and ceremonies. We can protect hope too." The Welsh Guards established what they called the Emma Thompson Initiative, a program dedicated to visiting seriously ill children and showing them the same respect and dignity they had shown Emma. The program required volunteers, and the entire regiment stepped forward. Colonel Richardson made the announcement to his troops with obvious pride. "Guard Thompson has reminded us that courage comes in many forms, and that our greatest honor is not in the ceremonies we perform, but in the lives we touch. This initiative will be her lasting legacy." As autumn turned to winter, Emma's condition worsened significantly. She was spending most of her time in bed, but her spirits remained remarkably high. Her room had become a shrine to her adventure, filled with letters, photographs, and mementos from her military family. One December morning, Emma woke up feeling particularly weak. She asked her mother to help her put on her honorary beret, and she spent the day looking through all her treasures and rereading her favorite letters. "Mummy," she said softly, "I want to write one more letter. To all of them." Sarah helped Emma compose what would be her final message to the guards who had become her family. "Dear my guard family, thank you for showing me that heroes are real. Thank you for teaching me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. Thank you for making me feel important and strong. I know I'm going to die soon, but I'm not afraid anymore. I know that love doesn't die, and that the good things we do for each other last forever. Please keep being heroes for other children who need to believe in brave people." Please tell them about me sometimes, and help them feel as special as you made me feel. I love you all. Your friend forever, Guard Emma Thompson. The letter was hand-delivered to Wellington Barracks, where it was read aloud to the assembled regiment. There wasn't a dry eye among the hardened soldiers as they listened to Emma's final words. Emma passed away peacefully 3 days before Christmas, surrounded by her family and holding her regimental coin. Her last words were, "Tell my guards, I'll always be watching over them." The funeral was unlike anything the small town of Leeds had ever seen. The entire Welsh Guards regiment requested permission to attend, and they came in full ceremonial dress. They formed an honor guard for the little girl who had touched their hearts so profoundly. Sergeant Major Williams delivered a eulogy that was later printed in military journals around the world. Emma Thompson was 8 years old, but she understood duty, honor, and courage better than soldiers with decades of experience. She reminded us that heroism isn't measured in battles won or enemies defeated, but in the grace with which we face our challenges and the love we show to others. She will forever be remembered as our bravest guard. The Queen sent a personal wreath and a letter to the family expressing her condolences and sharing how much her brief meeting with Emma had meant to her. But perhaps the most meaningful tribute came from the children Emma had befriended during her final months. Sophie, the little girl who had written to Emma, attended the funeral with her family. She placed a drawing on Emma's coffin, a picture of 2 little girls wearing military berets, standing guard together over a rainbow. The Emma Thompson Initiative continued to grow, eventually expanding beyond the Welsh Guards to other military units across the Commonwealth. Thousands of children facing serious illnesses have been visited by soldiers who learned from Emma's example that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with kindness, respect, and love. Every year on Emma's birthday, the Welsh Guards hold a special ceremony at their headquarters. They read her letters, share her story with new recruits, and remind themselves of the lesson she taught them, that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph of love and hope over despair. Emma's drawing still hangs in the Queen's private study, and her artwork remains on display at the Guards Museum. But her greatest legacy lives on in the countless lives that have been touched by soldiers who learned from a dying 8-year-old that their greatest mission was not to defend a palace, but to guard the dreams and hopes of those who needed heroes. Sarah and David Thompson established a charity in Emma's name, supporting families of children with serious illnesses and helping to fund visits from military personnel to hospitals. They often say that Emma's final weeks, which they had dreaded as the darkest time of their lives, actually became the brightest, because their daughter taught them that love shared multiplies exponentially, and that even the briefest life can leave an eternal impact. Emma's story continues to inspire people around the world, proving that sometimes the smallest person can teach the biggest lessons about courage, dignity, and the transformative power of treating every human being with honor and respect. She remains forever the bravest little guard who ever served.